معرفة.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In this lesson, let us discuss about liquidity, management. Now let us take an example and understand how an Islamic Treasury of an Islamic bank manages the liquidity issues. For example, if this is the Islamic Treasury, meaning to say a Treasury department of an Islamic bank, and if this Treasury department is in need of $1 million for 1 month, now how would it address its requirement? One of the commonly used structures today in the market is something what we call as a tawarruq. Many a times it is also synonymously used for Commodity Murabaha transaction. Now basically in this transaction what happens is that this financial institution is in need of cash, and to fulfill that need it approaches another financial institution. And some institutions have this concept of promise to purchase to be given by this institution, so that this financial institution gets a comfort. And this promise to purchase is nothing but which mentions that this financial institution is giving a unilateral undertaking to this financial institution, mentioning that if this financial institution purchases commodities, as in this example, worth 1 million, then this financial institution will purchase the same. So this is the first step. The second step would be this financial institution would approach a commodity house and purchase certain identified commodities. Here, of course, the first requirement is that these commodities or these assets have to be Sharia compliant. Second is these assets have to be identified, quantified. And the third important point is that the ownership of these assets have to be transferred properly from this seller to this purchaser. And another important point is that in case if metals are used, two metals should not be the subject matter of the contract of sale, and these two metals are gold and silver. The reason being that from a Sharia point of view, gold and silver are considered as currencies and not metals or commodities. And apart from those two metals, any other precious metals or non-precious metals could be used in case if metals are used. In some countries, palm oil is being used, and in some countries, some other commodities are being used. So whatever those commodities are, the basic principle is that these commodities have to be Sharia compliant. When these commodities are being sold, proper ownership has to be transferred, and the risk has to be transferred to this purchaser. Now the fourth step is that after purchasing these commodities, this financial institution will sell those commodities. So in this case, as we were discussing, that this Treasury department requires 1 million. So what happens? This financial institution purchases 1 million worth of commodities, and then it adds its profit margin. Now the calculation of this profit could be linked to a benchmark, and this could be anything which is agreed between these two entities. For example, a LIBOR or any other benchmark which is agreed between these two parties. So if we are taking an example where this institution requires funding for 1 month, so it could be, for example, a 1 month LIBOR used as a benchmark for profit. So they purchase 1 million worth of commodities, add their profit margin, mention very clearly in the agreement what is the profit margin, if it in case this is a Murabaha agreement. This could be any other agreement. This could be a Musawama agreement as well, for example. But generally, this agreement between Islamic financial institution and the Treasury department which is seeking fund, generally it is a Murabaha transaction, and this payment is deferred. So this Islamic financial institution can pay back the principal and profit after a month. Once this financial institution gets the assets and the risk and the ownership is transferred, then this financial institution will sell these assets to another commodity house and gets the liquidity. So in this case, from this last point, this financial institution will get the liquidity for its use. One important point which needs to be considered and which needs to be noted is that these two commodity houses have to be distinct and separate legal entities. They should not be similar entities. And another important point which needs to be considered is that the purchaser in this transaction of these commodities should not appoint this financial institution to sell these commodities to this commodity house, meaning to say that the seller should not be reappointed as an agent to on sale the commodities which are being purchased. So this Treasury Department can enter into any other relationship to sell these commodities with any other third party entity, but this Treasury Department should not appoint this financial institution as its agent in the second sale of the commodities. So this is another important point which needs to be noted and kept in mind. So what we understand is that for both liquidity placement and for both seeking liquidity, this structure can be used. In this structure, this financial institution is in need of money, so it is seeking liquidity, and this financial institution is having excess liquidity and it wants to place its liquidity. So in both these scenarios, they are managing their own liquidities. So what we understand is that this structure is used today commonly by various Islamic financial institutions, both to place liquidity and to seek liquidity. Now let us discuss about another important structure which is used to manage liquidity by Islamic financial institutions, and this is called as a wakala placement instrument or an Islamic agency instrument. Basically, this is an agency concept in which the principal who wants to place its excess liquidity appoints the other bank as its agent to invest the excess liquidity in Sharia compliant avenues. So for example, this is the first step wherein an agency relation is created. This financial institution wants to place its excess liquidity, for example, for a period of 6 months. So it enters into an agency contract, and in this agency contract, what is agreed is that this Islamic institution will invest the liquidity in Sharia compliant avenues, and it is mentioned that there could be an expected rate of return on this investment, and there could also be mentioned by this financial institution that please invest my liquidity in investments which may generate an expected return of an X%. Based on that arrangement, the agent would invest in Sharia compliant avenues, and then this is the return on the investment, and this realized return is given back to the principal after the agreed period of time. So for example, if this was for 6 months, so after 6 months this Islamic bank will pay back the principal plus the realized profit to this bank. And if this has been agreed in the agency contract, that if there's anything excess that would go to this bank as an incentive or a performance fee, that could also be done. So anything excess from the realized profit could be agreed in the agency contract that it will be given as a performance bonus to this Islamic bank. One important point which needs to be kept in mind is that there cannot be an indemnity given by this Islamic bank that irrespective of the actual performance, okay, I would pay you a fixed return. that would violate the principle of agency. Because in an agency principle, this financial institution is just acting as a representative of this financial institution. So whatever is the actual return from the investment, that needs to be shared with the investor. But there cannot be a guarantee which can be given by this financial institution. So this is an important principle which needs to be reflected in this agency contract. Of course, unless and until this bank is negligent and this bank is reckless in its investment. Otherwise, if this bank is diligent and even then there is no expected return, then this financial institution cannot hold liable to this financial institution, and this bank cannot give a guarantee on the return. So this is the basic difference between the Murabaha, which we discussed earlier, and the agency, which we are discussing here. So whatever is the actual realized profit from the business, only that realized profit needs to be shared or given to the investor or the investing bank. So this is another important structure which is being used by many banks in terms of placing their excess liquidity with other Islamic financial institutions.